Hi, my name is Tony Giordano. Welcome to my website, The Art of Men Acting. It's an odd title, I know, so maybe I need to first explain it. Ever since I was a little boy, I was always interested in what other people were thinking. I don't mean thinking about me, I mean just thinking. It used to amuse me to wonder what was going on in the heads of other people, how they were feeling, or why they behaved in a certain way. What did it mean? What was the connection? Whatever. Fortunately, I grew up in Brooklyn, so I was around a lot of people. And during World War II, I would think nothing of climbing some stoop and talking to Mrs. Levine, who seemed terribly sad and very, very old, and trying to cheer her up. So in conversation, I would ask all kinds of questions, usually how old was she, which was always amusing. Later in life, when I found out you're not supposed to do that, but when you're a little kid, you do whatever the hell you want to do, so you might as well do it as fast as possible. Anyhow, I asked her what age she would be, and each of the people I would ask, I would always, because if they were over 80, I felt they knew something. If they were over 70, well, I thought they were still probably learning, but more than likely they knew more than I did, etc. So I really enjoyed those conversations, but that wasn't sufficient. I was always really interested in what was happening around the world. What were people thinking of who lived in tents, who had none of the securities that came with the kind of family I came from, even though we lived in a little apartment in Brooklyn. My mother treated it like a castle, cleaned it weekly as if it was, and cooked for the week, despite the fact that she and my father also worked, and my sister and I went to school, but every night was a great meal. We had nothing else, but we had that. We had no books in the house. We had no interest in the world, from what I could tell. Our world was the safety of our home, the joy of eating together, and knowing that there was always leftovers in the refrigerator. And that was the world that I basically come from. So, what I'm saying to you is that all my life I wondered about why we don't talk to other people, why we don't hear from them. And finally, one day in spelling class, Sister Raphael brought out a German word she wanted to teach us called Verschmerz. I don't know why we were learning such a word in the Catholic grammar school I went to, but we were. And eventually I found out from her that it simply meant world pain, that there are people who by nature are empathetic to the human condition, and that when you feel certain things, you sense that other people around the world are probably feeling exactly the same thing. More than likely, that's what you're all going through. And so I love the word, and I began to realize that that was very important to me. But in time, one thing led to another in my lifetime, and I wound up traveling the country for my career. I was a theater director, and I put on plays all over America. So I lived for 5 or 6, sometimes 7 weeks at a time in an apartment or hotel. But I more often than not cooked most of the time. So after rehearsal, I would, like a normal person from the neighborhood, go to the store, buy my food, come home, turn on the TV, call some friends around America, and cook. And in that way, I guess I got to know America pretty well. And after I had done it for 20, 25, 30 years, I began to worry. It seemed to me that the people that I was witnessing, the people I was meeting, the people I was talking to, really basically seemed to have whatever, low confidence, if that's the right word for it. They somehow were missing something, whatever that was. I wasn't exactly certain. And then I began to realize that in this country, these are the people who have all the power. They vote, they spend the money. Everybody who gets elected or runs for any office or makes a movie or wants to sell an idea or an athlete, everybody needs the public to pay for the tickets or the product that these other people are creating. And I couldn't help but then begin to measure the ratio. And though I have absolutely no reason to believe I know what I'm talking about, I think the ratio is probably 98% of the world's population makes none of the decisions on their life. That the world is run by 2%. Now, that doesn't mean I think those 2% are bad people. I would think that among the 2%, 50% of them are trying real hard to service the public properly. 50% are creeps who are lying, cheating, stealing, and getting away with it. But I do believe that even the 50% who are trying real hard are somewhat foolish, because after all, how can you run for a major office, let's say the governor of your state, and promise that if you get in office, you will do incredible things for the people in your state? I don't know, you'll come once a week to their home and wash their dishes. I have no idea what kind of silliness you'll offer. But the problem is everybody's offering everything as if that's what the job is. Nobody is defining what is the job of governor, mayor, president. What is the job? So that we would then supposedly vote according to some knowledge. But unfortunately, to do that, we really need to be thinking people. And I find that however it happened through civilization, that because the 2% have taken all the responsibilities and in a sense screwed up, and the 98% have sat back and allowed it to happen, I guess I feel we're in trouble. And so I was trying to figure out, well, where do you go to help that trouble? And for me, I always go to the people. As a theater director, when I'm in trouble in rehearsal because something just isn't working anymore, I thought this play was going to hold together better. I'm now in the third week of rehearsal and I got a mess on my hands. I go home and reread the play. And I try to recall what it was that when I first read it, it had that other something that I don't have now. And then I go to rehearsal and try to recapture that. But I always go to the simple solution. So to me, oddly enough, the simple solution is the 98% of the world who are not really making their lives work need to begin doing so. I don't think for one moment they don't have that ability. I really don't. I actually think that it's actually a much simpler. In any case, what happened, I should tell you, I didn't realize it, is that eventually I decided to write for many reasons. One, to tell people that I had a good life, and here's how I went about doing it. And since I'm not a consumer, I would say I've never once bought anything that I was told to buy it on TV. That doesn't mean I don't have nice things. I have great things, but I'm very, very choosy, very patient, and I'm a good saver, meaning I don't throw away something that's nice. Second of all, I had a great education. It was the first thing that I personally fought for. And I wrote 3 books. And in my first book, which, that's not my first book, what am I talking about? My first book is Brooklyn Odyssey. Brooklyn Odyssey is about a boy. It's an autobiographical story, although, interestingly enough, it's really not a documentary about me. I told the truth. I used as much truth as my old memory could recall. But in all truthfulness, what I was really interested in was you. Always you. And I wasn't sure if I had achieved that or not until a friend of mine, Joanne Robertosi, decided to present the story in front of 82 strangers at a reading that was unrehearsed. And then that basically, from what she could do for it, I'm sorry, I'm looking for something I can't seem to find. But so we went to the reading, and I had never heard it, obviously read. It was in a screenplay format at this point. And so when the reading was over, 20 actors pretty much winged it. The mother and son I worked with for a few hours prior to the reading, that was all. But other than that, it was pretty much a cold reading. The moment it was over, 2 very old women who were not together, but they were sort of in the first row, turned to me where I was standing. I gather they figured out I was the author, and simply said, "Are you aware of how good a script this is?" So I had never been in that situation before. And of course, I had to tell the truth because that's really what my writing is all about. It's what this is all about. We have to start talking to each other in as honest a way as we possibly can, dirty underwear and all. And so I said, well, to be honest with you, I've never heard it read before. And I've been standing here thinking the same thing as you just said. And from that moment on, for the next, whatever it was, 40 minutes, these people all spoke about themselves. They all measured how they, so in other words, the thing that I wanted to be a universal action in the story about how this kid goes about, the story is called Brooklyn Odyssey, how he goes about owning his own life, which is really what an Odyssey is all about. And the way he does it is, fortunately, because he comes from a great family, but also he's curious and he's a brat. And he's not about to let anybody take his life away from him. It dawned on me while I was writing that we often hear about the rites of passage that goes with life. And those rites are R-I-T-E, right? R-I-T-E or R-I-T-E-S, the rites of passage. But this beginning is not one of those rites of passage. Those rites of passage are some sort of a contractual agreement between your boss and yourself, your society and yourself. Somebody hires you or not, or offers you or elects you. There's a way that can be taken away from you if you don't do a good job. The first thing that happens, I think, when we're born is a real right, R-I-G-H-T. We have the right of the first passage because we're born. We have a right to say, well, who am I? What am I doing here? How does this work? What do I want? What should I become? How am I going to function? That's what I call a genuine rite of passage. I write in the third book in my this preface. I said my passion is to explore life's nooks and crannies. I never fear the unknown as long as I can save the world, a difficult task since most of us are not present at the beginning of the world. Instead of being present at the beginning of each of the issues, we are thrust into life like a suitcase thrown from a fast-moving train. How well we place our feet on the ground determines how well we can save others, but at least how well maybe we can be able to save ourselves. And that is kind of what I feel, that all of a sudden you're here. I guess it's the Beatles who have a song that says, as soon as you're born, they take it away. Instead of giving you all, they give you nothing at all. Now, that's bleak. I didn't come from that kind of a background. I'm Italian-American, and a boy in an Italian-American family, believe me, with nothing. We had no home, no car, no special finances, but you're a prince. You are definitely the prince. You're special. Ask my sister, who was older. I guess she was 4 when I was born, and something tells me it was the worst day of her life, basically, and she never made me forget it. But in any case, she was a great gal, tremendous gal. But her biggest problem was my birth, I think. But nevertheless, I think what happens in life is that you have to find out how you're going to deal with that first rite of passage, because before you know it, everybody is telling you exactly what to do, how to wash, how to bathe, how to go to the bathroom, how to get ready for school, how to do this around the house, what your chores are, whatever it is. I'm not saying these are bad things. I'm not in any way suggesting that. Needless to say, we should be participating in our lives every day of our life from the beginning. But what I'm saying is I'm not sure that anybody gives you the chance to figure things out for yourself. Now, I was very blessed because I had a father who went out of his way to refuse to offer me any suggestions about my future, because his family were always asking me, what are you going to be when you grow up? And it used to really bother me. And I told him that. Why do they keep asking me that question? He says, well, they like you and they know you love school, so they figure maybe you have something in your mind. I said, but what should I tell them? He said, what do you mean? I said, what should I tell them I want to be? Because I don't know what I want to be. So my father said, well, if I gave you that answer, it's possible that you might do that just to satisfy me, and that clearly is not what you should do. I said, well, all right, but then how do I go about it? He said, you're good in school. He said, continue. You're very good in school. He said, try everything. Just try things. He said, keep trying things. One day, he says, you will find that thing that you like doing so much and that came so easily to you. Do that and you will be successful. Well, believe it or not, it was 15 years later. I was in graduate school in the drama department at Catholic University. And I was asked by Joy Mills and Patty Moen, two wonderful actresses, to direct them in some work by Moliere, just as a laboratory, not a big production or anything like that. And after 2 weeks of working with them, I knew. I really did. There was no question in my mind. My father had given me the gold, as he always did, needless to say. So what I'm saying is that in my case, I had the advantage of a reasonable father. My mother was really my closest friend in many ways because she and I, in a sense, were both the same person, really. I mean, we're both bossy, take charge, sergeants at arms at all times. And but I could always beat her. After all, I remember now I am the boy in an Italian American family. And she always had that smile on her face whenever I won an argument or whatever. I have the feeling my mother thought of herself as a fullback or something. If I was going to live my life, I had to get past her. As long as I got past her, she knew I would do okay. So she gave as much obstacle as she could, but she never could sustain it. Her sense of humor wouldn't allow it. I can't wait in the hope that I will make this story into a movie because I can't wait to see who the hell I would cast to play her. But in any case, because she was quite extraordinary in many ways. So what I'm saying is, when I finally realized it, I said, but the rite of passage that you went through may be a rite of passage that you should share. Not because you have to understand, if anybody reads my books, trust me when I tell you, you'll be disappointed because they're not going to help you. They're not self-help books. They don't tell you how to lose weight or how to make lasagna or any kind of crap like that. As a matter of fact, if you really want to succeed with my books, they're a trilogy. They're a continuity from beginning to end. So when you read them, it's odd because each book is different except for the thread that goes through from my childhood where I keep referring back to then what happens to the characters in book one. That's not the most important part of book two or book three, but I don't forget them is what I'm trying to tell you. And those people who have read all three books together, one person in particular, had such an incredible reading. I said, how did you do that? You're a great reader. He said, honestly, read all three books within 1 week. He said, I just couldn't put them down. I said, I know, but now you've understood them separately, but you've also understood. He said, absolutely. It's an amazing achievement. Now, you have to understand, my books are not profound. They're basically entertaining. The characters, in all the cases, in book one, the Italian-American family I come from, is not the mafia. I hate to tell you, it's just not. The majority of us, I mean, really, the real majority of Italian-Americans did not come from the mafia. I will prove it in a second by telling you that, of course, I was born by my mother, Anthony Giordano, except for the fact that every time we visited my father's family, Grandpa was Anthony Giordano, my uncle was Anthony Giordano, his son was Anthony Giordano. The women who married men whose background and lost their last name, nevertheless, their sons they called Anthony, whatever their last name was, Anthony Giannetti, Anthony, whatever. And so when we would be there, I remember I was 10, 11 years old, or maybe younger, because I think my father was home from furlough, so I had to be even under 7. But anyhow, I heard Anthony, Anthony through the house in Queens. And finally my mother came through and she said, I've been calling you. You never answered me. I said, how the hell would I know? You're talking about me. Everybody here is named Anthony. My mother said, keep your mouth shut. I said, why? They don't know that? You mean to tell me the entire family doesn't know that half of the family are all named Anthony? She said, well, we're all named after your grandfather. That's an honor to be named after your grandfather. I said, well, from now on, if you want to talk to me, my name is Tony. And my mother said, till the day I die, you will never hear that word come out of my mouth. I said, why is that? She said, because that's the mafia. If I wanted to name you after the mafia, I would have done that. You have not been named after the mafia, and that's it. And when I tell you, truthfully, I guess it was 65 years later before my mother died. Never once. If friends called when I was growing up as a teenager and said, Mrs. G, is Tony home? My mother put the phone out and she says, Anthony, it's for you. And that was that. And my friends would all be amused because they all knew the story. Everybody loved her. Anyway, so my feeling is that I thought, let me write the first book, Brooklyn Odyssey. Let me write about the family that I loved during World War II and the background I had. We lived in a simple apartment, clean as a whistle. My father went into World War II. We moved in with the grandparents and 4 aunts in a large, sprawling apartment over a dry goods store. When my father came back, we moved on the other side of Brooklyn to the Fort Greene Projects, which later became known as the Blackboard Jungle. I lived there between 7 and 11. I knew more about life at 11 than most people know now. And then we moved back to the very first apartment we started from. My mother had her eyes set on that. She wanted to recreate. She had this focus on the fact that she wasn't going to let the war intrude on her life. And when my mother wanted something, my mother got what she wanted, because she never wanted anything that she shouldn't have, and she knew how to get what she needed. So we moved back. And during that, I've now written about that journey. I've written about that childhood. And even though during that, all I wanted to do was get out. I loved them dearly, but I didn't want to live as a civil servant. And all my family are all civil servants. I didn't want Monday through Friday kind of work. I wanted the world, because I go back to my original statement, which is I always was interested in what are people in tents thinking about. And so I wrote Brooklyn Odyssey, and I am somewhat stunned by the incredible response that Brooklyn Odyssey has received from people. If you go on Amazon.com and you look for Brooklyn Odyssey, not A Brooklyn Odyssey, but Brooklyn Odyssey, there is a book called A Brooklyn Odyssey. It is not mine. Brooklyn, and it's probably wonderful, but I don't know it. But it's Brooklyn Odyssey by Tony Giordano. And before you buy it, because you can buy it as a Kindle or a book, or nothing. And as I said, if you're looking for something that's going to help you directly, do not buy my books. You will be really disappointed. I don't write that way, but that's not the reason. The reason is I don't believe in any of that. I don't believe anybody should be talking to you. The only thing I know about you is that you're a human being. You've tuned into me and you're listening, and I'm hoping that if I can get you to read the books and you have anything to say, whether you like them, you don't like them, you get back to me. And maybe that way we begin to take this thing that I'm trying to do, this Art of Men Acting. By the way, the Art of Men Acting is the subtitle for each of the 3 books. So Brooklyn Odyssey, The Art of Men Acting. The second book, which is when I began my career in the theater, is Tonight I Won't Be Acting, and it's all anecdotes. And this is also The Art of Men Acting, the subtitle. And it's all anecdotes of things that happen on stage, off stage, dressing rooms, the whole routine, that nobody would ever know. Nobody would ever know. And I was trying to show that the stars, many of whom are referred to in that book, in these anecdotes, are exactly the same as you and me, as my family, as everybody else, and all the celebrities on TV. We all, and I know they say we all put our pants on in the same way. I don't mean just that. We all have the same fears. I mean, there are actors who sometimes can't get out of the dressing room. They're so afraid of going on an opening night. So in any case, I do tell those stories. I was witness to all of those stories. Most of them are lovingly told, of course, but there's a lot of fun. As a matter of fact, a critic in Washington, D.C., Henry Herx, who's no longer with us, I put him on the back cover because after he read the book, he said that without this book, who would ever know that anyone was living such a wonderful life as a director throughout the United States? Tonight I Won't Be Acting will inspire anyone who wants a career in theater to see that it is possible. And for all others, Tonight I Won't Be Acting is a fabulous read filled with anecdotes of stars. Henry Herx. And I'm obviously very grateful to Henry Herx. And then not-for-profit, I was one of those, again, The Art of Men Acting. So throughout my 3 writing books and my life, I have seen the journey of life as one big stage. And though I'm a theater director, I actually see the people I meet in a supermarket as being on stage in a way. They're living their lives. They're making choices. After all, what is a good play but nothing more than some great choices that characters are making while they're telling us the story. So in Little Piecemeal, people, their behavior is a continual action. I'm trying, therefore, to say, well, if that's true, how do we go about finding a way to bring in 98% of the world's population and say, since you are already acting in your behavior, wouldn't it be a good idea if you knew more about what's causing you to do this, or things that would help you to enlighten you? Wouldn't that be in some ways helpful to you? So, I mean, there's a point in, it's right here. Sorry, there's a point in this third book where I'm talking about the fact that as an idealist, which I've always been, more often than not, people try to discourage you. You know, you're too crazy, you're never going to get anywhere, everybody's going to hate you for it, all of which is true. But nevertheless, here's my opinion of that. I said, man has power to become a fully realized human being. He has the power. I can't see in this light. The journey of your odyssey can succeed only if you have no fear to live it. When you're, I'm having real trouble here. When you choose to fight for, I'm so sorry, people. I'm sorry this didn't work. I'll have to do it again. I didn't prepare properly. I kind of like the way it was going, too. Oh, well. Well, let me start that over. Maybe we can cut. In any case, I'm basically a realist. But my ideals seem fantasy to people because they think, well, you can never have the ideal. But the problem with that is that I actually think that until you have the ideal, you don't really have reality. You really don't. Reality comes with the ability to make it work. Reality is not a failed concept that we were thrown here into a mess and we have no talent to do anything else but let 2% of the world's population make a mess out of us. So basically what I have written here is that, I can't see. I can't read. Sorry, folks. Sorry.